Welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect Voice of the Innovator podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into hybrid IT management strategies. Growing complexity from the many moving parts in hybrid IT and multi-cloud deployments are forcing IT managers to seek new productivity tools, moving away from manual processes to bring higher levels of automation to data center infrastructure has long been a priority for IT operators. But now, new tools and methods are making composability and automation better options than ever. Here to help us learn more about the advancing role and impact from IT automation is Francis Guida, Manager of HPE OneView Automation and Ecosystem Product Management at HPE. Welcome, Francis.
All right. It's great to be here, Dana.
We're glad to have you. What are the top drivers, Francis, for businesses seeking higher levels of automation and simplicity in their IT infrastructure? What are the motivating factors these days?
Well, it really relates back to what's happening at a business level. I think it's a truism, but business today is moving faster than it ever has before, and that puts pressure on all parts of a business environment, and that includes IT. And so IT needs to deliver things more quickly than they used to, and they can't use some of the old techniques that they've done. They need to move to much more automated approaches. And that means that they need to take work out of their operational environments.
And what's the complexity foundation? What's driving the complexity that would make such automation so beneficial?
Well, it really starts from the business. IT used to be a support function. It used to support business processes, and it could kind of go along on its own time scale, and there wasn't much that the business could or would do about it. In 2019, 2020, technology is part of the fabric of most of the products, services, experiences that businesses offer. So when technology is part of an offering, all of a sudden technology is part of how a business is differentiated. And when it's part of how a business is differentiated, business leaders are not going to take, I'll get to it in 18 months as an answer. They're going, if that's the answer that they get from the IT department, they're going to go look for other ways of getting it done. And in 2020, with the advance of with public cloud technology, there are other ways of getting things done that don't come from an internal IT department. So really, IT organizations need to be able to keep up with the pace of business change because businesses aren't going to accept what their historical timescales.
And why does this require an ecosystem of partners? Why not just have one management tool to rule them all? Why does this require a bit of a team sport approach?
This is not a one-size-fits-all world. I talk to customers in our briefing centers regularly, and the first thing I ask them is, tell me a little bit about the tool sets that you have in your environment. And often I ask them about what kind of automation tool sets do they have? Do they have Terraform or Ansible or Chef or Puppet or vRealize Orchestrator or something else? And it's not uncommon for the answer to be yes. They have all of them. So even within a customer's environment, they don't have a single tool. And so what we need to do is work with the tool sets that the customers have in their environments.
So it almost sounds like you're trying to automate the automation. Is that fair?
I'll probably get into it as we get into some of the specifics, Dana. But we definitely are trying to take some of the hard work that has historically gone into automation and make it much more simple.
And I should think that the complexity isn't going to get less. It's probably going to get more because we're now talking about pushing compute operations and even micro data centers out to the edge, sometimes in places like factories or in transport vehicles, almost anywhere in a medical environment, for example. So should we sort of brace ourselves for a continuing ramp up of complexity and diversity when it comes to IT operations?
Oh, absolutely. With technology part of the products that an organization delivers, you can't have a single technology that's going to answer everything. Is the user going to interface through an SMS service? Are they going to use a smartphone? Are they going to be a browser? Is it actually an endpoint that interacts with a system that's completely independent of any user-based technology? I mean, all of this means that IT has to be multifaceted. Even if we look, more at data center technologies, sort of for the last 15 years, probably virtualization has been pretty much the standard way that IT likes to deploy new systems. Now, increasingly, organizations are looking at a set of applications that don't run in VMs, but rather are container-based, and that brings a whole other set of complexity that they have to think about in their environment. So, yeah, complexity is like entropy. It just keeps growing. When we started thinking about what we could bring in to bring a lot more flexibility to on-premise data center environments, we looked pretty holistically at the problem, because I don't think the problem could only be addressed through better automation. In fact, it has to be addressed at a deeper level. And so what we did with our composable infrastructure strategies, we thought about architecturally, how could we bring the same kind of flexibility you have in, say, a public cloud environment to your on-prem data center. We realized we needed a way to liberate IT beyond the boundaries of physical infrastructure by being able to group that physical infrastructure into pools of resources that could be much more fluid, that could be changed. The physical aspect could be changed. Now, there's some hardware infrastructure technology in that, but a lot of that magic is also done through software, using software to configure things that used to be done in a physical manner. So what we did was we defined a layer of software-defined intelligence that captures all of the things you need to know about configuring physical hardware, whether it's firmware levels or BIOS settings or connections. We encapsulate all of that in software. And then automation is the layer is the icing on that cake. So once you have your infrastructure that can be defined in software, you can program it. And that's where the automation piece comes in, which is being able to use everyday automation tools that organizations are using to automate other parts of their IT environment and apply that to physical infrastructure without a whole bunch of unnatural acts that were previously required if you wanted to automate physical infrastructure.
Are we talking about a fundamental shift in how infrastructure should be sort of conceived or thought of here?
There's been a saying in the IT industry for a while about moving from pets to cattle, and even now we talk about thinking about herds, and that's exactly what has to, you can brute force that by trying to automate to all of the low-level APIs that there is in physical infrastructure today, because most infrastructure today is programmable with the rare exception. But then you, as the organization who's doing that automation, has to internalize and has to make your automation account for all of the logic. If I make a change in my storage configuration, what does that mean for the way my network needs to be configured? Or what does that mean for firmware settings? You have to maintain all of that in your own automation logic. There are some organizations in the world who have the scale of automation engineering to be able to do that, but the vast, vast majority don't have that ability. And so what we do with composable infrastructure, with HPE OneView and our ecosystem is we actually encapsulate all of that in our software-defined intelligence. All I have to do is take that configuration file and apply it to a set of physical hardware. It brings things that used to be extremely complex down to what a pretty standard IT organization should have the capabilities of doing today.
And not only is that going to appeal to those enterprise IT organizations, obviously it's also going to appeal to this ecosystem of partners, because they now have hooks and APIs and the means to use the bedrock infrastructure to create their own value-added services. So tell me a little bit about how not only does the composability benefit the end-user organization, but it creates fertile ground for this development of the ecosystem of partners.
When I started the Composable Ecosystem Program, we actually had 2 or 3 partners. This was about 4 years ago, and we've now grown to over 30 different integrations that we have in place today with, many more partners it is that we are talking about. And what gets those partners excited, and those range from, the big everyday names like VMware and Microsoft to, sort of smaller companies that, may be present in only a particular geography. But what gets them excited is that all of a sudden they are able to bring better value to their customers. They're able to deliver, for example, an integrated monitoring system where maybe they're already doing application monitoring. All of a sudden they can add infrastructure monitoring, or they're already doing facilities management and, sort of managing power and cooling. And all of a sudden they get a whole bunch of data that used to be hard to put in one place, but now they can get a whole bunch of data on the thermals of what's really going on at the infrastructure level. It's definitely very exciting for them.
Who jumps out at you as a good example of taking advantage of what composable infrastructure can do from a partner perspective?
I think the most frequent conversations I have with customers start today with basic automation. They have tools in their environment. I mentioned many of them earlier: Ansible or Terraform or Chef or Puppet, or even just, PowerShell or Python, or, like in the VMware environments, you realize orchestration. They have these tools, and they really appreciate the way what we've been able to do with publishing a lot of these integrations out on GitHub, having a community, having direct support back to our engineers who are doing this work. They're able to pretty straightforwardly add that into their environment. So the automation, and we really have partnerships or have done some of the work ourselves with a lot of these open source tools. Pretty much, I think every automation tool that's out there that's really in mainstream use by IT, we can handle. And I think that's where a lot of the conversations we have with customers start. If they don't start there, they actually start back in basic operations, right? So one of the ways that people take advantage of the automation in OneView, but they don't realize that what they're taking advantage of with automation is they don't realize they're taking advantage of automation, is the way that OneView helps them integrate their physical infrastructure into a VMware vCenter or a Microsoft System Center environment. For example, in a VMware vCenter environment, an administrator can use our plugin. They can sit in a vCenter environment. They suck all of that it automatically sucks all of the data from their physical infrastructure that's relevant to their VMware environment, and they can see things in their vCenter environment that they otherwise couldn't see. Like, they can see everything from, here's a VM that's sitting on this VM host that's connected through this HBA out to this storage array, and here's the logical volume, and they can very easily visualize the entire, both logical as well as physical environment. That's, that's automation, but you're not perceiving it as automation. You're perceiving it as simply making an IT operations environment a lot easier to use. So, sort of the IT operations integrations, VMware, Microsoft are probably the poster child, but, sort of other tools like Micro Focus, like some of the capacity plannings, a lot of capacity planning tools, event management tools like ServiceNow, a number of those kinds of tools. That's another big use case. If I go back to automation, and instead of going sort of going down to the IT operations, if I go up to more cloud management, sort of the other way organizations take advantage of the ecosystem and some of these partners is, okay, it's great that you can automate a piece of physical infrastructure, but what I really need to do, what I really care about is automating a service. I want to be able to provision my SQL database service. So that has certainly infrastructure pieces, but it has, a bunch of application pieces. Organizations want this done through a self-service portal. So we have a number of partners who enable that. Morpheus is one that comes to mind, and we have quite a lot of engagements today with customers who are looking at Morpheus as a cloud management platform and taking advantage of how they can then not just provision the logical aspects of their cloud, but also the physical ones through all of the integrations that we've done.
Right. So given that we've inherited a lot of complexity, we have these new deployment models that extend across hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. We're able to get better visibility using some of these services and these partners, and that allows us to also automate to a higher degree. But I want to get back to that point I made earlier. How do you automate the automation? Is that what OneView is designed these days to help? How do you not just find yourself in a more complex situation, even though you're trying to automate? How do you keep that, in a sense, manageable?
I'm going to talk about a customer who's an online retailer. They are, so if you think about the retail world, obviously a highly dynamic world. Sort of technology is obviously at the very forefront of the product that they deliver, right? Technology is the product that they deliver. So they have a very creative marketing department, and the marketing department is always looking for new ways to connect to their customers. And so the marketing department has access to a set of application developers who are developing, sort of new little widgets, new ways of connecting with customers. Some of those developers like to develop in VMs. They're, sort of more old school. Some of those developers are more new school, and they prefer to use a container-based environment. The challenge the IT department has is that from 1 week to the next, they don't fully know how much of their capacity needs to be dedicated to a VM versus a container, because it all depends, versus a container environment, because it all depends on what the business decides they want, what promotions or programs it is the business decides that they want to run at any one time. So the IT organization needed a way to pretty quickly switch an individual server from being configured as a VM host to be configured as a bare metal container host, because they didn't want to pay a VM tax on their container host. They identified that if they were going to do that manually, there were dozens and dozens. I think they had 36 or 37 steps it is that they needed to do. And, sort of they could not figure out a way to automate individually each one of those 37 steps. When we brought them a Synergy infrastructure managed by OneView, automated with Ansible, they instantly saw how that was going to help solve their problem. They were going to be able to change their environment from one personality to another personality in a completely automated fashion. And now they're able to do that changeover in just 30 minutes. And instead of needing these dozens of manual steps, they have 0 manual steps. Everything is fully automated. And that is what is enabling them to respond to the business requirement that means that so the business needs to be able to run whatever programs and promotions it is that they want to run, and they can't be constrained by IT. So maybe that gives a picture of how valuable this is to customers.
Yeah, no, it really does. It really speaks to the business outcomes, which is agility and speed. And when a group of data scientists want you to spin up a data environment, you can do it. Or if your application developers need a test and build environment, that can be done. So it really does hit all the different aspects of IT. And yet at the same time, the economics are there. Speaking of economics, automation, we've been talking about in terms of process and technology, but people are looking to simplify and even automate the economics of how they acquire and spend on IT, try to do it on a pay-per-use basis. Is there an alignment between what you're seeing and doing in automation and what HPE is doing with GreenLake? Or any understanding of how the economics and the automation, in a sense, perhaps reinforce one another?
Oh, absolutely. What we bring here is physical flexibility, and what GreenLake brings is financial flexibility, and those things go hand in hand. In fact, the example that I was just speaking about, this online retailer, they're a retailer, right? So they're very, very busy at the Christmas season, and they're maybe busy in Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and back to school, but they have times where they're much less busy. They have actually They actually have GreenLake flexible capacity integrated into their environment. And so in addition to having the physical flexibility in their environment, they are aligning what it is that they're paying for technology financially with the way that their business model works. So, these things go hand in hand. And I think I said earlier, I get to talk to a lot of customers because I'm based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's where we have our corporate headquarters. So I'm in our briefing center 2-3 times a week frequently. And there's almost no conversations that I'm a part of that don't lead eventually to the financial aspect of it, as well as the technical aspect of how the technology works.
And it also strikes me, because we've opened this up to the programmatic level, the software-defined level, that a new breed of innovation can be brought to bear. Do you see, once people can get their hands on these tools and they can start to automate and put in repeatable processes that are still flexible and customizable, what have you seen on the innovation side? What have people started to do with this that you maybe didn't even think they would do when you designed the products themselves?
I don't know that I'd say we didn't think about this, but I'll tell you that one of the things we've been able to do is make something that the IT organization has been talking about for a while, or the IT industry rather has been talking about for a while, that we've had difficulty doing in an on-prem IT environment. There's lots of organizations who have IT capacity that is only used some of the time. And a really classic example is an engineering organization that provides a VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure for engineers. And then at the same time, these engineers need a bunch of analytics capability. Maybe it's genomic engineering or seismic engineering or fluid dynamics in an automotive industry. They have both of those needs. Typically, they've been running both of those things on different sets of physical infrastructure. What we can do with our automation is we can actually enable them to collapse that into one set of infrastructure, which means that they can be, much more financially efficient. And because they're more financially efficient on the IT side, they're able to then devote more of their dollars to driving innovations, whether it's finding new ways of finding, oil and gas under the ground, or if it's sort of finding new ways of making automobiles much more efficient, or, sort of uncovering new secrets within our DNA. By spending less on their infrastructure, they're able to spend more on what their core business innovation needs to be.
Francis, I've seen other companies try to approach automation with a trade-off. They say, well, if you only use our cloud, it's automated. Or if you only use our hypervisor, it's automated. Or if you only use our database, it's automated. But HPE has taken a different tack. You seem to have looked at heterogeneity as the norm, and the complexity as a result of heterogeneity is what automation needs to focus on. How far ahead is HPE on composability and automation, and how differentiated are you from others who have put a trade-off in place when it comes to solving automation?
Well, we've had composable on the market for 3+ years now. And we've achieved, for example, with our Synergy platform, we've got over $1 billion run rate for HPE. We've got 3,600 customers and more and counting around the world. And it's been something that's been a tremendously successful business for us. I think one of the biggest things that I find interesting is that I don't see a lot of activity out there of people who are trying to mimic or imitate what it is that we've done. So this is something that has been for several years, and I expect will remain something that is fundamentally differentiating us from many of our traditional on-prem infrastructure competitors, and sort of positions us very well to provide an alternative for organizations who like the flexibility of cloud services but would prefer to have them in their on-prem environment. So it's something that has been tremendously differentiating for us. And, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm not seeing a lot of signs out there in the market that there's somebody else who's got something coming hot on our heels.
Okay, before we sign off, let's take a look to the future. Increasingly, Not only are companies looking to become data-driven, but IT organizations are also seeking to become data-driven. As we're gathering more data and inference, and we're able to start to be predictive in how we can optimize IT operations, and I'm, of course, thinking of AI ops in this regard. What does that bring to the equation that we've been speaking to about automation and composability when you've got more data to be analyzed and that analyzing can take the step beyond break, fix, and go towards heightened levels of optimization and automation? How will AI ops change this in the coming couple of years?
Yeah, I think that's a real opportunity for further innovation in the industry. I think we're really at very early stages about how we take advantage in a systematic way of all of the insight it is we can derive from just knowing what is actually happening within our environment and sort of mining those insights. And absolutely, once we've mined those insights, it creates the possibility for us to take automation to another level. We've been throwing around terms like self-healing for a couple of decades. I think a lot of organizations are not yet ready for something like a self-healing infrastructure. They still there's a lot of complexity within our own environment, but then when within the environment that HPE controls, but then when you put that into a broader heterogeneous data center, there's even more complexity. So there's I think some trepidation, but I think over time, for sure, the industry will get there. That's something that I think we'll be forced to get there because we're going to be able to do that in other execution venues like the public cloud. So the industry will get there, and the whole notion of what we've done with automation of composable infrastructure is absolutely a great foundation for us as we take our customers towards the next journeys around automation.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how growing complexity from the many moving parts in hybrid IT and multi-cloud deployments have forced IT managers to seek new levels of productivity. And we've also learned about the advancing role and impact of IT composability and automation to better manage today's dynamic and extensive data center deployments. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Francis Guida, Manager of HPE OneView Automation and Ecosystem Product Management at HPE. Thank you so much, Francis.
Great. I enjoyed our conversation.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining us for this sponsored BriefingsDirect Voice of the Innovator Hybrid IT Management Strategies interview. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your IT community and do come back next time.